Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here. I am back again today doing another video. Today's video, we are going to be ranking all winners from all 40 seasons of Survivor. Spoilers ahead. Obviously, you can see on screen I have all the winners put here. The way I went about ranking them was on basically how dominant their win was, and um, I said to myself, could this player win in any scenario? If the answer was yes, I put them higher. If the answer was they only won because of a very specific scenario or thing that happened and it was like really only based on that one thing, I put them lower. Or if it was kind of somewhere in between, I put them in between. Um, so I have five tiers here. There's a white tier, which means kind of the worst winners of all time. Purple means they aren't the worst, but they needed a lot of help to win. Blue means like middle of the pack, like they maybe showed a lot of agency in their game and were able to do some things, but they also needed some breaks. Green is like very good, and gold was like a best of the best. They would have won no matter what happened. So, real quick, Natalie, I'm just going to go through each and say why. Some I'll group together if they're very similar, some I won't. Natalie White basically only wins because people didn't like Russell, and that's the only reason. Um, she really herself didn't do anything, but just um, was like in the right place at the right time. And I don't want to chalk it up to was basically lucky, but she basically benefited from Russell Hantz having the personality he has and no other reason. 39, Chris Underwood, tons of breaks, and also the whole Edge of Extinction thing. He only really, I think technically he only had to play like 10 days of Survivor, whereas the others had to play 39, so I hold that against him because he was out of the game on the Edge of Extinction for so long. I think that's kind of an unfair uh, advantage or kind of a Deus Ex Machina, like a get out of jail free card. He literally did had that because he got out of the Edge of Extinction after being voted out. Um, Ben from Heroes, Healers, and Hustlers, same sort of thing. He had this. I'm trying to think of what the word is. I can't think of it right now, but I guess get out of jail free card in that he was dead to rights at Final Four, and basically because of a twist that nobody knew about, and the producers decided to hide until Final Four, he got a get out of jail free card. Both of Sandra's wins, I think 7 is better than 20 because she does a better final tribal performance at season 7. But both seasons, she basically, her strategy is like, I will do nothing all season so nobody perceives me as a threat. And then hopefully at the end, I'm more likable than whoever sits next to me. But so much of her game relies on other people, and she basically takes no agency or control of her game whatsoever. That, like, if people would have wanted to vote her out, they could have without batting an eyelash because she made no fight to not get voted out. Michelle at 35 had a ton of breaks, and if Joe doesn't get medically evacuated, she gets voted out at final five, and so basically she needed to catch a huge break to get to the finals. And then also, I think she didn't even have to go to a tribal until like the final 10 players, which was after the merge. And so she caught a ton of breaks in that. Um, the tribe that she was on won all like the pre-merge challenges, so she barely even had to play the game for the first like 20 days of the season. Uh, Next, I'm gonna pair together Fabio and Bob. Both of them were terrible strategists, but went on really impressive immunity runs towards the end. I think Fabio won 4, and Bob also won 4 individual immunities to carry them to the end. And then also they were likable, so I think with the bottom 6 I had, they either like didn't actively do anything like Natalie or either time Sandra won, or they caught like these massive breaks that propelled them when, if everybody would have been healthy or if the producers wouldn't have thrown in some extreme twist, they wouldn't have won. But everybody else basically won fair and square. It's just to the degree of how impressive they were. So Fabio and Bob were both likable to the jury and both had really individual immunity down pat. Jenna in season 6, again, kind of similar game to Sandra. Didn't really do anything, but she also was more likable to the jury, and she was more prudent in trying to make some decisions and was in the majority more of the time, so I have her higher. Danny, basically, Michelle was trying to play the game that Danny played, how to play perfectly from the bottom, in that she had great social relationships and was very, very likable on her season, and won some individual immunities. Kind of an all around player, but probably like peak social gameplay. Adam, to me, I have him pretty low here. Never played that great of a season. Again, plays from the bottom like Danny and Michelle, but I think he just makes a few more decisions than them and holds a little bit more power throughout the game, so I have him higher. 29 Ethan, like Danny, actually more so than Danny. I'd say Ethan played the best social game a winner's ever played, and that basically everybody on the entire cast absolutely loved him. So I have him at 29. But again, a lot of things were out of his hand that like if Kim would have just decided something different at the final three, he would have gone home. Um, I would have had him higher, but he just left a lot to other people's control. Like he basically sat back and let Lex run the game strategically and just was like good to coast for a while, but because he was so dominant socially, I have him a bit higher here. And Vesepia played actually a similar game to Sandra, where she was kind of like the anybody but me mentality, but I'd say she was better socially than Sandra, and people give her a lot of credit for flipping Nalia and Pascal, but I give more of that credit to Kathy actually. But Vesepia was just like basically played Sandra's game, but was just better socially. Denise in season 25 next here played really strong and was good in challenges and decent strategically, but basically had to catch a lot of breaks too, I think, in that um, like the tribes that she joined at the swap, they all were having a lot of infighting, and if they would have just thought about everything logically, they would have voted her off really quick. But because there was infighting already going on, they were already preparing to turn on each other, so she really benefited from that. So from that perspective, I just hold that back because that's something where I say to myself, I don't know. And also, she was really, really close to going home at Final Four, so I'm not like she could have easily lost that season by just them deciding to go with Malcolm instead of her. Chris Doherty at 26, really good in challenges. I think he won 3 or 4 individual immunities and a couple down the stretch to solidify him getting to the end. Good socially in that he got in well with the women and consistently played from the bottom, but was able to win over a lot of people and keep himself in the game. But the thing that I hold back on him is that he coasted for a lot of like the pre-merge, I felt like, and even the post-merge he didn't really try to do anything until he was the final man, and then he said like, okay, I need to kick it into gear. And also he was somewhat close at going home at final 3 if Twilight goes the other way and keeps Scout. Sophie at 25 basically plays a decent game. um, to me, Coach really, that was Coach's season, and her win is a mix of her being really smart and relatively likable, I guess, but mixed with a lot of people just being angry and disappointed in Coach. So it was more like people voting against him rather than voting for her, in my opinion. Tina season 2 plays similar to Vesepia actually, in my opinion, but she demonstrates a bit more um, control throughout the season, and does things in the pre-merge that vault her a little bit higher than Vesepia, who seemed to just be kind of along for the ride for a lot of the time. And Tina, again, super, super likable like Ethan, where everybody basically loved her. Amber, season 8, the way I thought about this was people probably think this is really high for her, but Amber she actually got quite a few votes, but just the way the season played out, she was always at the center of like every alliance. Like her and Rob were the center of every alliance, and she basically was a really close ally to tons of people in the game, and there was really never a moment where she was ever in real danger of going home. So for that reason alone, I have her a bit higher on this list. She was just at the center of the Power Alliance, and She didn't necessarily make huge moves, but she also didn't really need to because she always was on the right side of the votes. Aris, very similar game to Amber. Basically was at the center of the power alliance that ran the game, and he himself never did any spectacular move, but he was basically on the right side of the vote every single time post merge, and just could kind of he was just so insulated because everybody was looking to him as their close ally, and he was really the one that held his alliance together, and everybody looked to him as like one of the closest allies in that alliance. Mike from season 30, he plays a very like if you take the game that he played, a lot of people want to compare it to Ben. Ben won no individual immunities, but he found I think 4 idols. So to me, what Mike did was he set the record for most individual immunity wins at 5 for a man, which is the high I think tied for the highest all time. It is, and he also found idols. So I don't know what people give more respect to, winning immunity or finding an idol. I actually give a little bit more respect to winning immunity because finding an idol is like the ultimate bailout. But winning immunity is harder in my opinion. And he also exerted a lot more control over the game early on, which is something that players like Ben or Fabio or Bob never did. And I think all those guys actually played really similar games. Fabio, Bob, Ben, and Mike, but Mike just exerted the most control of any of those 4 guys. And he was actually like running his alliance early in the merge, and it's just because people started to perceive him as a threat that he went to the outside. But he exerted a little bit more strategy than any of those others too, and he tried to be a little bit better socially than Ben, so I put him higher here. Next, I have my top 20. Wendell is next. I don't put him as the higher tier because to me, um, Wendell was so close to losing this season that it's hard for me to put him that high. And also, he's sort of like one of these guys that you say he did great, but how good does he do when he's not part of a dynamic duo? Like Dominic being his partner in crime really helped him advance a lot further in this season, and I'm not like Wendell probably still would have done great, but I'm not sure he does as good if Dom isn't there, like taking the brunt of a lot of what they were doing as well. At 19, I have Nick, who played a really solid game down the stretch and also goes on a little bit of immunity run, but he was also much more ingrained in a really solid alliance than people who went on an immunity run like Chris, Doherty, or Mike or Bob or Fabio or Ben. Um, and I think the jury liked him a lot more than those guys, so I put him higher. JT, very similar to Wendell, except he was part of this power couple who was running the game, but ultimately he just was better socially than Wendell, and so I put him up here. But I also don't put him in the god tier because I think if Steven Fishback wins that final immunity, JT is third place. Like he for sure loses if he doesn't win. If he doesn't win the last, I think he actually wins the final 3 immunities. If he doesn't win those, I'd say he does not win the season. He kind of needed those to propel him to the finish line. Tom, season 10, similar game to JT, part of a power couple that ran the game. And again, it's very similar to JT in that he needed to win the final couple immunities that he won to propel him to the end, or else he would have been voted out. But he did, so he got to that spot. But those two played very identical games to me. Tony, season 28, very strategic game. Actually, him and Yule I'm going to put together. Very strategic games, not really physical. Even though they were physical specimens, they didn't win individual immunity at all. But they were a mix of really smart strategically, but also decent enough socially to not annoy people too much or turn them against them when they got voted out. Their jury management was actually decent, despite Tony being really erratic, and Yule similar, but he was just very calm and likable. Actually, similar with Tyson, he wasn't. He I think he only won one individual immunity, but he just had the strategy on lock. Um, so yeah, I have him in that group as well. Uh, so the next couple, I would say Parvati, Rich, Tommy, and Sarah. I have them all in the same group here. They all were people who didn't really excel at individual immunity that much or anything, and they really just were lock solid in their alliances, and they rode the dominant alliance to the end basically. And they didn't have to do anything spectacular, but they were like the closest. Everybody in their alliance saw them as the closest ally, and the reason why I have them higher than like Aris, who I said a similar thing about, is that there was a high percentage chance that at the very end Aris was going to get voted out, but for these people there was also no chance that they were going to get voted out, um, just because their bonds were so strong with their other members. What holds them back is that they do, like for Parvati, what put her at the lowest of these four, who some people consider her like one of the greatest winners ever, but she had some breaks in the early game where like first episode, if Johnny Fairplay doesn't essentially quit, she was the one who was going to go home, and so for that reason I rank her the lowest of this group. Um, but yeah, I would say besides that, these four all played very similar games. Next, Cochrane. Cochrane, similar actually to those previous four, just rode a dominant alliance, but what he did that the others didn't do is that I think he actually won two individual immunities as well, so for me, that's what put him up here. Also played a perfect game where nobody ever voted for him, and he swept Final Tribal. And again, JT did that same thing, but JT was way closer to going home, if not for winning one individual immunity. But Cochrane was literally never on anybody's radar for voting out. He was always just insulated in his alliance. Todd at 8, um, again, was at the center of a dominant alliance of the season, but what puts him ahead of, let's say, the Parvati, Rich, Tommy, Sarah, Cochrane's is that he had some big moves, like voting out James and voting out Jean Robert and getting rid of Denise when they did. He was responsible for some big moves and some strategy that the others weren't as prevalently responsible for. 7, Jeremy, similar game to Todd, but just more dominant physically. But both were at the interior of some great alliances, and they rode those to the end, but also had some big moves sprinkled in along the way. But Jeremy, I think, won one or two individual immunities, so that's why I put him higher. And actually, Jeremy similar game to Natalie, but Natalie just did what he did better. She was always part of the dominant alliance, but she knew when to cut the fat and when to get rid of John Mish and when to get rid of Baylor, and not to be a pawn of somebody else, but to always be the one kind of making the decisions, honestly. So for that reason, I put her here. Tony season 40 is similar to these archetypes of Todd, Jeremy, and Natalie, but just does what they did to the extreme in that part of the dominant alliance throughout the game. He basically was going to beat anybody in Final Tribal with him. And the only time I would say he was ever questioned about winning was at the fire making. But besides that, he completely dominated the season, and I don't hold the fire making against him because I think that's one of the worst parts of the game that Survivor has ever introduced. Like the producers, like Jeff loves the fire making challenge, but most fans have expressed that they hate it, me included. I think it's terrible. It completely changes the fundamentals of Survivor. Once you get to the final round, either the final four or final three, the game at that point is supposed to come down to social game. And honestly, by having this forced fire making thing, you completely blow up that concept. But that's a topic for another time. The top four, I'd say, are like there's a little bit of a gap between 5 and 4 to me. And I'm going to talk about the top four all as kind of one group. These four were going to win their seasons no matter what. No matter who they faced, they were going to win their seasons. They dominated socially, they dominated strategically, and to varying extents, they dominated immunity challenges as well. The only one who didn't dominate immunities was Earl, but um, okay, so why do I have Boston Rob 4 and not Earl? Boston Rob was in danger. Like there was some like very vague talk of him being a target like episode 1, but that never materialized. But for that reason, I have him fourth. Whereas Earl's name, except for one throwaway vote, was never even written down, and he won the final jury in a sweep. So Earl to me played like the true perfect game of Survivor. Like he did what Cochran did, but on steroids, because Cochran was able to meet like everybody on his tribe pre-merge and basically formed all of his alliance before the game even started, which is a very unfair advantage to me. And Earl did all of that in just the first couple of days out there. Kim dominated socially, strategically, physically, had the whole package, um, and was basically going to win that season no matter what. The only reason I have her lower than Brian is because like Alicia in the final tribal was like, I was planning to get rid of you at like 4 if I would have still been in the game, but you got rid of me before I had the chance. That's kind of speculative, but there is some glean that there was some vague remote out there chance that Kim could have gone home based on that supposed plan. And Brian at number 1 because there was literally no chance he could have ever lost this game no matter what. He had the numbers going into the merge, and he won the final 3 immunities to propel him to the end, but he didn't need to, because even if he didn't, everybody in that final 5 alliance had Brian as their closest ally and was going to bring him to the final 2 no matter what. So there's literally no chance he could have lost. And also, versus any of those people who were going to bring him to the end, we know, like, for a fact, the others who were on the jury would have voted for him. A lot of people hold it against him that Clay got 3 votes and he only got 4, but what they don't understand is that Brian knew for sure he was getting those 4 votes no matter what, so it didn't matter how the other 3 people voted, and the fact that they voted for Clay was just by chance, but Brian knew for sure he was getting the 4 votes that he needed to win the game. So there you go, guys. Those are my rankings of the winners all time. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.